So although gardening is very much a fun hobby for me, there are occasions when I do feel a little bit overwhelmed, and over the years I've kind of developed some strategies to help me cope with that. And so in this video I thought I'd just talk that through. So my sense of overwhelm comes from a few areas. So the first one is I have a lot of things on the go. I mean, in life in general, but also in gardening. So we grow something like 250 different varieties of things. That's a lot of stuff to keep track of. And the way I do that really is by using my database. So I have a pretty good idea of everything that I need to sow in a particular month, but I've also created views in the database which I find incredibly useful. And so I've got a view that tells me what hasn't germinated yet. So in terms of thinking, you know, has this failed or has it succeeded? Because once things germinate, pretty much it's going to succeed from my perspective. So I have that list, you know, what's not germinated, and I can check through that, and I can check around in the polytunnel, wherever, you know, all around the house where I've got things germinated, and the only things I'm thinking about are the things that haven't germinated yet. And then I've got this other list of what I've still got to sow this month. And so again, I'm only thinking about that small subset, you know, not the 250 varieties and the goodness knows how many successions, 4 successions, so not the 1,000 batches of things that I've got to sow or deal with, but just the things that I've got to sow this month still, not the ones I've already done, because we've got them separately. So, and I just petition it like that, you know, what things haven't I planted yet, you know, and so when I'm thinking about I've got this bed, what shall I plant in it? I've just pull up my list, what's not been planted yet, you know, so it's been germinated, it's not planted yet, and you know, that's the sort of list that I'm thinking through, because I don't like to over plan. And I think that's another thing with the sense of overwhelm, is that if you over plan, then you can start worrying too much, you know, will this crop be finished, will this crop be ready to take its place, and all of that sort of thing. And you've kind of got this rigid model of where everything's got to go, and that rigidity can cause some stress because gardening is inherently unpredictable. So I don't like to overplan. I like to have a rough idea of how much I want to plant in any particular month and roughly where it's going to go, but I'm quite happy to juggle things around to take account of, you know, failures and opportunities and things that grow a bit slower or things that grow a bit faster, whatever the situation is. Now, Debbie and I are also self-sufficient, and so, or pretty much self-sufficient. We have actually made the decision that we will buy the occasional cauliflower, for example, now. But we're pretty much self-sufficient now. And in order to deal with that challenge, because it can be a challenge to have enough fresh food every week of the year, we grow an intentional surplus, and that means that we're always harvesting up here and sort of eating down here, and the gap is what we give to the kids and our friends. And because we work, I work fairly hard to make sure that that gap is reasonably stable through the season, from within a season. So, you know, in summer, you know, the gap's, you know, fairly big, that sort of thing. What's the scale? That sort of thing. But then when we get in autumn, it's a bit bigger, and then when we get into winter, it's a bit smaller, and then when we get into spring now, it's huge. So between seasons, it's quite variable. So we set people's expectations of how big that surplus is likely to be, and how much food they're likely to get in any particular season, and then more refined in a particular month. But Debbie and I, we're down here, right, our demand, so we're always way below what we're harvesting. So we never go short, we never worry that we won't have enough. And because nobody else that we feed is self-sufficient, everybody else is going to the supermarket to top up what we can provide to them. And so they don't really mind that much if they have to buy an extra bag of spinach, because we don't have that much spinach in January, for example. So it's not really that much of an issue for them. It just makes our life really free and easy. And as a result, I never really feel any kind of pressure from the perspective of harvesting. And I also never feel very much pressure now in terms of trying to do anything really early, because everything's always full all the time. So right now it's spring, every bed is full, most beds, 80%, are being harvested. There's no pressure to fill those beds with peppers or tomatoes or cucumbers or anything that is, not frost hardy. And because of that, I'm never kind of worried really about the weather. And because we've got cold frames and low tunnels and the polytunnel and things like that, so we're kind of protected to a large extent from the vagaries of the weather. A big storm doesn't really bother us that much really. Floods don't bother us that much because we're quite high. So weather doesn't really bother me. But what does bother me, and where my main sense of overwhelm still comes, is there are certain times of year when there's a lot of stuff that it seems like I've got to do. So I've got to clear, all these beds and this whole polytunnel and everything, all of it in May, basically, to replant it all for summer. Maybe 80% of it, 20% will get replanted in April. But that means April and May are, pretty busy. And it also means September and October are pretty busy, because that's when we're transitioning from all the summer crops over to all the winter and spring crops. And so again, I've kind of developed a few strategies for that. And the main one is that I primarily now think in terms of I've got to do 2 beds a week. And so rather than sowing all my peppers in one big batch, for example, or all my tomatoes in one big batch, I sow them kind of for two week kind of intervals, or so they mature in 2 week intervals. They're actually sown in 1 month intervals because everything kind of catches up as you get through the seasons. But that means that, I'll clear 2 beds and put peppers in sort of early May, and then I'll clear another 2 beds in mid-May, and then another 2 beds at the end of May, sort of thing. And to go nice staggered planting plan. And so I'm not having to clear everything all at the same time. It's the same with the tomatoes. It's nice and staggered and phased. So I'm generally always in this mode where I'm thinking, well, I don't have that much to do. All I've got to do is to clear 2 beds a week. I'm generally on the allotment for 2 days a week, so that's 1 bed every day that I'm here. And so that works out quite nicely, and it's the thing I like most about the bed system and successional harvest. And that successional harvesting thing has lots of other, successional planting, has lots of other advantages. It does, as a result in successional harvesting, so you don't get all of your peppers all at the same time, and you don't get all of your tomatoes all at the same time. You don't get all of anything all at the same time. It's nice and staggered and smooth. It means that if there is a kind of disaster, it's probably only going to affect 20-30% of things, and because we grow an intentional surplus, we're probably still going to be fine. It's just going to be, a few friends don't get peppers this week, sort of thing. So the result of that is, again, less worry and smoothing of the workload. But April and May are still pretty busy, and so one of the things I decided to do this year is kind of put gardening first. So in previous years, I'd always really put hiking and cycling and things like that first. But this year, gardening comes first. And then once the gardening's done that week, then I'll do other things. And that's a little bit easier now because my grandkids are now old enough. So when I'm looking after them, I can bring them to the allotment and they can kind of play on the allotment. I mean, my granddaughter, she's pretty small still, like just over 1. But it is still possible to get some significant work done while she's sort of here playing around and grubbing around in the soil. And then the final thing is kind of the little and often. And I do really like that, especially in winter. I'm very much a little and often sort of person. I probably come to the allotment most days and only spend sometimes maybe half an hour here or an hour here, because often working outside in winter isn't that much fun. But just that little half an hour a day kind of adds up, and it means that really, come springtime, there's not really that much to do. And so, everything's, all the little maintenance jobs are done, all the weeding's been done, all of those sorts of things. And so I can concentrate on the things that really need to be done, which is clearing beds and replanting them. And now, again, in spring, weather's better, so I'm out more. So as I say, I'm only really here 2 days a week. But again, I think that counts really as little and often, sort of 2 4 hour days, and then a harvest day at the weekend. So that kind of adds up to my kind of target, which is about 10 hours a week on the allotment. Debbie, by contrast, on her plot, she is either here for 2 days solid and then not here for 2 weeks or something like that. So she is very much not a little and often person. So her plot has been designed completely differently. I mean, it's mainly perennials, and it's been designed for long, intense periods of effort with big gaps in between them. And that is just perfect for perennials, really. So I guess in summary, we're saying get organised, but not too organised. Do little and often, and maybe a bed system is perfect for that, because it just naturally lends itself to, sort out this 1 square metre today, then move on to that 1 square metre tomorrow, sort of thing, and it's very well structured and simple to see what you've got to do. And the little and often lends itself to the sort of successional sowings and things like that, and kind of try and keep visible only the things you need to be thinking about. So not the big picture of what you've got to accomplish in a year, but the specific picture of, what you've got to get germinated this week, what you've got to get sown this week, just this little, what beds you've got to get cleared this week, what beds you've got to get planted this week, sort of thing. Just this little picture. And that all seems, pretty manageable. And, if all those fails, just get the kids to come and help. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.